somewhere in Leicester. But it's fine because we have the best two here anyway. Please welcome artist Brett Jones and game director Martin Hollis. I'm going to start by talking about the news. Goldeneye is finally escaping the Nintendo 64 and coming to new consoles. I know you have nothing to do with that, but how do you feel about it?
Where's the check?
Yeah.
That's a joke. It feels fine, you know, I mean at this point in time, it's 2022 and the game came out in 1997. There's been a lot of games that have come out since 1997 with the name Goldeneye. Initially it was a bit difficult for me because I felt you feel an attachment. But nowadays, it's fun.
Well, it must be good to see your work sort of come to other machines and a new generation be able to play it.
It is.
Yeah, except that none of my work is now actually on it at all.
That's not true.
If they've changed all the images,
it looks to me like they've done a very straight port indeed, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do. As soon as you start trying to even up-resing the textures is a bit dangerous, I think. But you know, as soon as you touch any of the geometry in the game, it will start to mismatch the game mechanics. I think it's just safer to do what I think they're going to call it, which is a remaster.
Well, it's been a busy year for you and GoldenEye. You've been doing panels, there's a book, there's a documentary, there was an article in The Guardian, we're here at EGX, there was some events on in Cambridge as well. Has the attention surprised you? I actually understand that you got together back in November, you did your own little reunion, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We all met up for dinner at an Indian restaurant where a lot of the development happened during the 3 years that we made the game. So we all got back together and had a lovely evening in a weird kind of way because it was like 25 years later.
It was surprising how much everybody looked the same.
And have you enjoyed what have you made of the year and all the attention? Has it surprised you?
It's bizarre to suddenly be a cultural icon and turn up in The Guardian. I mean, that's phenomenal.
In the culture section.
Yeah.
It keeps reminding me it was in the culture section.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, we'll take it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the game's development. And I think a lot of people do know the stories, but we'll sort of brush over it and go through some of the stuff. How did you come to work on GoldenEye? How did it start?
Well, I'd finished on Killer Instinct. I was like third programmer, and I heard a rumor that a couple of guys from the Donkey Kong Country team had gone to the Leavesden, where they were going to shoot this movie, and had met the cast for a press event to raise the profile of the Bond 18, as it was called. In the end, they decided not to make a GoldenEye game, and I heard this rumor, and I said to Tim Stamper, who's one of the directors, I'd like to make the game. And that was basically it. It wasn't just a nod, he said, make a game design document, and so I made one, and he said, yeah, you can get started.
Well, how did you join the team?
I was there for about 3 months. I was in a room learning how to use Alias Wavefront. They put me in a room with a load of videos and some books, and it was like, right, go and learn this software. And one day Martin came in, and he asked me to do a weird little test, which I only found out what it actually meant about 3 months ago. And he then said, okay, come and join the team. So it was great. I mean, I'd never done anything like this. This was my first job since coming out of university, so I had no idea.
What was this test?
Oh, it was, can you put this camera so it rotates to a certain amount of degrees looking at this other point? It was quite simple.
I don't know if anyone knows Killer Instinct, but in Killer Instinct there's a bunch of levels. In Killer Instinct there's a bunch of levels, and most of them the camera moves along a straight line depending where the two fighters move, but some of them's a slightly arcing line, so it's actually a little bit problematic to generate that curve, and that was the test.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I only found out what it was about 3 months ago.
Well, glad you could be connected. There was a reputation at the time, that's existed for many years, still a bit of a reputation now, that licensed games were usually rubbish. Goldeneye is often cited as the exception. But does that make it hard to recruit people to the team? You had quite a eclectic bunch of new talent on the Goldeneye team.
What did I ask you as like qualifying questions?
Do you want to work on a James Bond?
Yeah, I think that's sufficient.
Yeah.
Would you like to work on a James Bond game?
Yes. Yeah.
Everyone I asked said yes, they would.
Good. Well, we'll go to the design document you just spoke about, because there's this oft-told story about how the game could have been an on-rails experience. Actually, you said at a panel I saw you recently that the dream was always the game to play like the way it played.
It was.
So did you always foresee it as being what we got in the end?
Foresee is like a strong word, you know. When you make a document, it's harder, it's more real than you might think, maybe. You know, it's a list of what you hope for, it's a description of what you hope for, but at the same time, you've got to be ready to throw a lot of the ideas away in development. Especially, not only, but especially if there's deadline pressure. So I think I wrote maybe or something. You could connect two N64s together. We didn't, at the time I wrote the document, we didn't know what the N64 would look like. We didn't know it had 4 controllers.
No.
So I just said maybe we could connect 2 machines together and you could play a multiplayer game. That was it, basically.
And the on-rails thing, never really something you wanted to do.
That was quite a lot of the rationale for doing that was we knew it would take a long time to make a big game with the adventure element that I wanted to have. So kind of fallback position was let's just do it on rails first, because you need a lot of the same technology. So it was kind of either it was a stopping off point, it was like a point we could have terminated the project early, or if management gave us enough time, if they gave us enough latitude, then we could do everything we hoped to do.
Were you surprised they gave you so much time?
I don't really remember thinking about it that much.
No, I didn't remember feeling any pressure. And certainly Martin didn't let it trickle down, that's for sure. It was just come in, do a bit more, do a bit more, do a bit more.
Yeah, that's how it was. I was aware of the pressure. You know, I mean, Howard Lincoln sent a very lovely fax telling us off about missing Christmas. I think I'd forgotten the deadline even existed, but anyway, he sent this fax. It was like a 3-pager telling us off, saying, you know, it compromised Nintendo's relationship with retailers and so on. It was quite severe, you know, but really there was nothing to be done other than carry on.
I'm sure they forgave you in the end.
I feel they did.
Yeah. What some people perhaps don't realise about the game, and you really told it really well in other interviews, is how you built it from scratch. Right? You had nothing. You didn't even know what the console was going to be like. What did you have to learn and overcome, and what was that experience like?
Well, I guess, I mean, you had tools that we bought in, and they were expensive.
Yes, I mean, I had to learn how to model something that would work in the game. You know, I was given, like, you could have so many polygons to do a character, and then you can have so many textures. So that was a question of figuring out where I could put my textures, where I could put my geometry to get the best look. And as you can see from the later characters, the later the character came into the game, the less polygons they had, because we've got less left. So that's why I think Michigan's got a triangular head, because I'd run out of polygons by that point. But I mean, I had to learn how to model, how to texture using the tools. So that was Ninja and Game Gen at the time, because we had no Photoshop. So everything was created within Alias Wavefront. I also learned how to use the motion capture system, how to clean up the animation, how to then put that onto our models, how to make sure that it worked for all of the skeletons in the game. So yeah, it was a lot when you think about it like that, but at the time it was, okay, well this is the next step and the next step and the next step.
I guess on the art side, you know, for the graphics and for the audio as well, there were a lot of tools that existed, that were in the world, that we could buy in on the software side, and you know, Rare was there was never any difficulty. If we wanted something and it was £20,000, there was never any issue. But then the software guys, myself included, had to join up all those packages into a pipeline and write a game engine. You know, there was no way you could buy in a game engine at that time, because there wasn't one on the market.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. But we didn't really think about that, because it didn't really. Maybe today that sounds like hard cheese, but at the time it was just how you made video games. It was worse because the sophistication of the machine and the fact that it was 3D for the first time. It was one of the first 3D games Rare had made, and nobody knew how to do stuff. I mean, a lot of Mark Edmonds' work on the character pipeline got reused by other Rare teams.
Yeah. And you didn't, to begin with, you didn't even know what the N64 was what it could do.
No, we just had emulators, didn't we?
Yeah, the key information was missing, basically. We took a gamble that it would be able to do something in the region of 1,000 to 2,000 triangles per second in a frame at 30 frames per second. And it basically pretty much paid off, but you know, I mean, you know how many levels we had to completely remodel them because...
Yeah. I mean, that's why I ended up doing a couple of them to help Carl out, because he was our level designer. You know, he pretty much did 90% of the levels, including all the multiplayer stuff. And I think I got Statue Park and the Jungle. And of course, having come from characters to suddenly having to build levels, I had no idea of all the sort of things that you needed to know to make it optimised and to make it work as well as possible. So I was just sticking things in willy-nilly to try and make it look good.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what you were doing and you mentioned motion capture as well when you were learning that, which seems to be an excuse to hit your colleagues.
Well, yes, I mean, that's the best part of my day, really, because with Goldeneye, what we had a motion capture system called Flock of Birds, and this was a magnetic system, and what it was a unit sat on the wall that took all the measurements, and then this was all attached by a load of wires onto a diving suit, you know, a swimsuit. And they were all on various points, and the whole idea was that they would take the measurements where this person was in the room. Now, the one thing we wanted to do was make sure that there was no anticipation when we were doing the motion capture. So I would get Duncan Botwood in the motion capture suit and basically tell him to close his eyes, and then I would approach him from different directions and just hit him. and hit him. So pretty much, I mean, there's about 1,000 animations in this game. So it's pretty much Duncan getting whacked every single time. And to the point where you see them get pulled backwards, that was literally me with a rope around his middle, yanking him off his feet. So yeah, he did work hard for that game.
Yeah.
He never complained about that.
Did he not even complain about the suit? He was telling me about the suit's never been washed, or?
No. Because the markers were actually sewn onto the suit, it never, ever got washed. Ever. So it came, I think it was used for Killer Instinct, somebody had used it, and then it went on to Goldeneye, and yeah, he was in that suit, and it did not smell good. It was kind of an old rubber smell. No, it wasn't good.
Oh no, I don't want to talk about that. Well, Brett, you also, obviously, it's easy to forget, the internet wasn't really around back then. So when you're building the game, I guess you had some film stills and you were able to visit the set. When it came to everything else, and even that, where did you get?
Yeah, like you said, there was no internet, so there's no just looking up an image of something for reference or getting any of that stuff. So fortunately, I had quite a good library of James Bond information. Carl had some brilliant architecture books. We had Jane's Book of Guns, which showed us all of the information about the firing rates and what the guns look like and how to model them. But pretty much anything we needed for reference, we either had to have books for or some pictures from the actual studio, because there was nothing. So that person that's been through all of the textures on the game and like decoded them and seen where I've coloured around them, well done, because they're all from books. If you can tell me which books they're from, then I'd be impressed.
I had no idea.
Of course you didn't.
Did you? But there was, you told me there was one computer at Rare you could go online and use.
Yeah, I mean, it was this is a sobering story, I guess, for the younger people, but one of the things I did over the duration of Goldeneye was try and persuade everyone at Rare that they should use this program called Mail on their computer. And set up to connect to all the SGIs. You're supposed to network them together, and it's a big advantage. So to say it was early days for networking computers together would be an understatement. But eventually, email did catch on within the confines of Rare, and I managed to persuade Tim and Chris Stamper that they should get an internet connection. But they sequestered it, which was probably the right thing to do. They had one machine in a little room in the Manor farmhouse, and if you wanted to use the internet, you had to walk over the car park, go up the stairs to this one room. Generally, there wasn't anyone in there using it, but I did do a bunch of research on there and found some good materials about James Bond, but in terms of visual,
no, there was nothing. And there was certainly no way of then getting that off that machine onto something else, because that just didn't exist. That facility of getting something off a computer to another computer, I mean, the only thing we had was a scanner. That was it. If you wanted to get in a picture, you scanned it, and the scanner was not good, which is a good job. Everything's so tiny.
Yeah, I think Graham would have talked about this, I'm sure, if he was here, but I think even when he was trying to show you the music, he couldn't just send you a file with the music on. He had to put it on a tape and play it on a deck. That's the story that he told recently.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, initially we didn't connect the machines together. They were, it's just Cat 5. But anyway. And another thing on the software team, it's fine having one software engineer and you haven't invented source control. But you know what it's like trying to merge two people's work.
Yeah.
So Steve Ellis, who joined the team as the last coder, and he did a lot of the early work on the multiplayer. He said to us, "We want to use this thing called source control." It's like, oh, okay, what's that do? My God, what a godsend. Like, no longer did Mark and I have to spend one day every 2 weeks, like taking these two enormous pieces of software, maybe 50,000 lines, and like manually go over them, merging lines so that it worked. This software would do it by magic. Absolutely amazing. And nowadays, it's just insanity to work without source control.
Such a different age. I also, obviously, you used the Monty Norman theme a lot in Goldeneye. Were you impressed that they managed the composers managed to get so many different levels of music out of basically one small piece of theme?
Well, I mean, you certainly felt like it was part of the James Bond universe all the time you were playing it, because you had that riff going through it, no matter which level that you were playing. And it kind of sort of, you know, it made up for the lack of audio or any voice acting that was in the thing, because it gave you that soft sort of like, here we are in the James Bond universe, because you can hear his theme tune all the time wherever you're going.
It means a lot to people, you know, on an emotional level, and it communicates. Basically, that music, I mean, not just the Monty Norman theme, but all of the music, it communicates that you are James Bond. You know, I mean, I was kind of worried in the beginning because we're making a first-person shooter, and they paid all this money for Pierce Brosnan's likeness, and it wasn't going to be on screen, essentially. It wasn't going to be on screen at all. It was the initial plan, because you never see the main character. That's how it works. So
isn't that what we had the fly-in to begin with, so you could see who you were going into?
That's one of the major reasons we added the thing where the camera flies into the back of his head, but you only get to see the back of it. So, yeah, Mark did everything he could to have the camera spin around.
Yeah.
And you did the animations, like he straightens his tie on the train.
Yeah, exactly. So
trying to make the most of, you know, God knows how much money they paid for that. And I know the Monty Norman theme was an extra budgetary item on the license. And, you know, Howard Lincoln came around Rare one time in the duration of Goldeneye's development, which was about coming up to 3 years, president of NOA, and, you know, he didn't say much to us when he was coming down the corridor, but he did say, you know, we paid a lot for this track. Make sure you use it as much as you can. So, okay. I mean, it really works. And I have to say, it's a shame that Graham's not here, but the work that the guys did on using all of the audio, all of the music, the Eric Serra work as well, it's just incredible. The amount of material they got out of, you know, it's almost just two tracks.
Yeah, I mean, when you listen to Graham talk about it, and the technical side of what he had to do to cut up that music and get it actually on the cartridge, it's absolutely fascinating to see that, you know, he's got this little sound bite, and then if you repeat it enough times, you end up with an actual tune. It's just so clever.
Yeah.
It's all MIDI based.
Yeah. Did you ever want to put the theme song in there, or any of those other iconic?
We didn't actually have the idea of using music from other movies.
No, we used everything else.
We did, you know, in the very early days, Nintendo gave us a licensing document that said everything we could use, that we were permitted to use in the game, and it was like, basically, it was everything from every movie.
Yeah.
So.
But that changed, because you had to take out the Bond characters you could.
Yeah, that did happen. My surmise is that the film people were concerned about how much Sean Connery would ask for. So we had to take out the 3 extra bombs, because we have 4 bombs in multiplayer, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
3 of them had to come out.
But you did have one final foray, right? One final battle.
Oh yeah, before taking them out, we had a celebratory tournament with 4S. That must have been really late in development. Yeah, we said goodbye to George Lazenby was never on the
No, he was never made.
But you know, the other 3 were there. We gave them a good send-off.
Not many people talk about this, but I actually find Goldeneye a very funny game. Like, it's humorous. I still laugh now at the no James Bond sign that's above the door in the facility level. I think it's like every time. I've been 25 years I've been playing it. I still find it funny.
Is that your joke?
Is that you?
Yeah.
Was all the humour you? Was all these little in-jokes and...
Well, I mean, the thing like Mark Edmonds as the skateboarding man on one of the little computers, that was definitely me.
Yeah, we got Mark Edmonds. He did the majority of the software, and he's kind of standing there on a green screen in 7am. Bunker.
Yeah, because he didn't want his face specifically shown in the game. So I said, okay, well, we'll have this little animation, and you know, we put Dr. Doak in there as a character, and
With the Russian hat.
yes, with a Russian hat. Yeah, so he's banging his fist on the table. So that's always there. Yeah, I mean, you know, why not? Let's make it more interesting for us. We're on it for 3 years.
I guess about 50% of the humour was probably Brett.
Very generous of you.
Did you just turn a blind eye, or did you find that?
It was more like, I mean, for me, every time people do ask, which is your favourite James Bond? You know, and sometimes I say Sean Connery, and sometimes I say Roger Moore. It's mainly what your era is, I think.
Definitely.
And, you know, Sean Connery was more serious, and Roger Moore was more quirky and flippant and humorous. And honestly, I do like the silliness that really came to the fore in a lot of the Roger Moore movies. And so I was always very on board. But I do remember when I saw the Moonraker.
I knew you were going to say that.
So that it's basically a yellow. It's a yellow costume. It's kind of slightly loose. It's a little bit of a spacesuit connotation, but it's kind of, it's not lemon yellow, but it's quite fruity yellow. And they have these black
earmuff
kind of earmuffs, but built into the suit, and it's just the most, you know, Moonraker is certainly a candidate for the silliest of all James Bond films, I think.
Yeah.
And I did look at this, and I was like, no, it's fine. You know, it's just like a 1 second decision.
Yeah.
Approved.
Yeah, because I made male Moonraker guards, and I also made female ones as well, but they came out because we're not supposed to shoot women.
That changed with Perfect Dark, though. It was fine to
shoot anybody in Perfect Dark.
Yeah. So that was an interesting fact.
I wanted to have dogs in the game. I wanted to have dogs that run around on a couple of levels, and we just thought it through. And True Lies came out, I think, about that time, where he knocks there's two Rottweilers, I think, and he knocks their heads together. Absolute James Bond sequence, completely lifted from James Bond. Anyway, whatever the reason was for me wanting dogs, I wanted to, and then I thought it through, and I thought, there's no way on God's earth that Nintendo is going to allow the player to shoot. It's like, it's kind of a, you know, you cannot kill animals.
No animals.
In that context.
No animals were hurt in the making of this game.
Because Nintendo did give you a bit of feedback, and they'd sort of basically say, can you make it less violent? Can you make it... you may not even have picked it up at the time. I think you didn't necessarily understand Miyamoto's notes that I read. But they were okay.
Well, we all knew, I guess, that we were walking a pretty fine line between what Nintendo's house style was.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember early on we were doing some, I remember these blood tests we were doing, and one of the guards, we had this test character would walk out and you would shoot him and literally blood would come spurting out of him from anywhere that you shot him. It was all done on cards, but it was absolutely grim.
It was awful.
It was just horrible, it was just a bloodbath.
It was wonderful, but it was also awful. And it just kept on. It was like, where's he keeping it?
Yeah, so eventually that then became vertex colours, you know, so little tiny speck of red on, you know, wherever you hit them, because that was basically what we could get away with to show they'd been shot. And then obviously the bodies disappeared, so that you didn't have a level littered with bodies, otherwise it literally would have just been, I don't know, gladiatorial in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing you do in game development. You realise something isn't suitable and you try and tweak it.
Yeah.
I mean, we realised it was a bit horrific. The players, the NPCs, you kill them and they lie on the ground. Just hang around as a corpse. That was too horrible. So they just like tactfully fade away. And it's a nice sound, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, going back to sort of the development experience, you've spoken about the amount of hours you put into that game. Sort of how extreme was it? And what was the culture like that sort of led to that? Or was it just...
And that was normal. I'd have lunch there and have dinner there. But I mean, lunch was half an hour, so you'd have just enough time to eat your lunch and then you'd be back at work. And when you think about it, we were in Twycross, and Twycross is a village in the Midlands, in the middle of nowhere. There is no village shop. There is nothing apart from the zoo. And that's what most people know Twycross for. So there was nowhere to go. So you stayed at Rare and you did your work. I mean, as I probably said, I did over 6,000 hours overtime on this game, and I was right at the bottom of the overtime.
Yeah, Brett was one of those slackers on.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark probably did the most, and I was probably second place, because we were both there from the very first month to the last month, and we were pulling the hours. Yeah, we pretty much didn't do anything else except going to work and then go home and sleep.
It must have been like the culture of that place, because you just kept adding more into the game yourself, right? Because I know that it was in the design document originally to add multiplayer. You sort of added multiplayer at the end. Is it right that you kept it a secret from some of your bosses?
Well, I don't know that I thought of it that way. It was just that the whole of development, I felt it was my game. I felt that it was the team's game, and we didn't really go to management for say-so for anything.
Yeah,
I can't remember approaching them for approval for anything at all, except adding someone to the team, or buying another piece of software, another piece of hardware.
Yeah, because you gave it to Steve as a job, didn't you? The actual multiplayer.
Oh, the multiplayer. Yeah. That was one of his. That was like his third task on joining the team. Start with something really small, and then something small, and then can you implement multiplayer?
Yeah, you're not doing anything, just write multiplayer.
It basically worked when he was finished. It was a good first draft.
Do you remember, because I guess when your Rare was a famously secretive company back then, you wouldn't have got much feedback on the game you were making. You would have been very close to development. So do you remember a point in development when you realised we might have something special here?
Not in development. After it came out and we started seeing the rental stuff come back, then that's when we started figuring out that we got something that was people were watching, but certainly not for me in development, because I mean we were heads down 12 hours a day, and because there was no internet, you had no contact with the outside world. There was none of this, checking your contacts or social media or anything. I mean, we even only had about 2 talks from the people doing our software during that time, so there was no, certainly in our side, contact with the outside world whatsoever.
The only thing I can say really is that a few of us did enjoy playing it a lot on the team, but there's no exterior judgment over the course of the project that was fed back to you. Nobody said, yeah, it's a good game. It scored pretty highly on Mario Club, so that was nice, but I didn't really know what the number meant. It was just a number. Because I hadn't seen multiple games go through Mario Club, so that Mario Club was Nintendo, probably still is, I think. Nintendo's internal evaluation system, and they evaluate every game in front of a bunch of experts and in front of, basically you'd call it focus testing, but they have their own way of doing it. But once the game came out, we did start to get feedback. Well, actually, testing, which was probably the last 6 weeks, coming up to maybe June '97, the guys in America who were testing the game, so the Brits who were testing the game in Rare, they had about 6 testers. They never said it was a good game. You never got that information. They were like, it's terrible and this is why. But the Americans, Eric, who ran the group in NOA, said, people are asking me to come in to work overtime when they're playing this game.
Wow. Maybe was that not the moment, or?
It was an inkling.
And you obviously, was it not at E3, or did you take the game to E3?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were at E3 when it was showing.
Yeah, that's right.
What did you think was the reaction?
I remember the screens being busy all the time. It was, it was just busy, busy, busy. Once they'd figured out the controls, because we'd really sort of used those controls to give you the aiming function, which people weren't used to.
Yeah.
So it was very, very busy all the time at E3, even though we only had a small section. But there also was an area where you could win the golden controller, which I believe now is something that's very, very sought after.
I hear you might have one.
That's possible.
Was there anything that didn't make it into the game? You're heading towards the end of development, certain things obviously fall away.
There was some knife option, I believe, that didn't go in because there was some horrific murder, and we were told to take it out. It was a double knife option that you could have used throughout the game, and we had to take that out. I remember that specifically.
Yeah, that happened. You have to react to these kind of things, especially when you're getting close to the release date. It's still a sensitive area today.
Yeah.
And I also, on the Baron Samedi model, it was the only one I got any feedback from, because Baron Samedi has a huge cross on his chest. So I had to edit that so it's just a long bar now, because we weren't allowed to show any religious iconography in the actual game. So yeah, that was, I think, the only note I ever had about any of the characters.
Well, you took out obviously to take out the bonds for licensing reasons, but was it, you mentioned that you were thinking of doing the opening credits?
Yeah, that was, I think, towards the end, because we'd finished doing all the sort of like characters and environments and so forth, we did discuss doing the, in the opening titles of actually Goldeneye, you've got girls coming out of guns and they're sort of like dancing on the top. I remember beginning to create those, because we were going to do an opening title sequence, because that's very James Bond, but I think that got dropped because of space.
Yeah. I mean, it was only a 12 megabyte problem. I get a lot of emails that are bigger than that now. We did the Goldeneye style, because Goldeneye, they refreshed the titles and they had a nice render of the gun barrel sliding around, and we replicated that. It just couldn't get it to run at 30, so it was just the easiest thing to say, you know what?
I can remember with that James Bond walk-on, I know Duncan did the walk-on, we did it a few times, and I remember when we did the motion capture, he always came out with a limp. Every single time James Bond walked on with a limp. And eventually I had to sort of modify it manually, because we just couldn't get the motion capture to get a decent James Bond walk-on.
Is that because you kept hitting him?
I think it's because he couldn't walk by that point.
But was there anything, you asked me to ask this question, and I can't remember why, I think we had a few too many drinks, but you said, what was the weirdest thing that happened during the development of Goldeneye?
It's a really tough question.
What, you mean not being locked in a barn for 3 years and not seeing anybody? No, what's
Yeah, that's a pretty good candidate for the best possible answer, because when the project was finished, I remember going outside and walking in some street of some town and thinking, this must be what it feels like to get out of prison. Just walking around, you see people walking around, and it's unreal, the absolute normalcy, but it felt completely weird.
Yeah, just getting to see your family again.
You had a moment where you met the cast, didn't you, when you visited the set? Is that?
Yes, I was very fortunate. I went on one of the later trips to Leavesden when I had the digital camera. And if you can imagine, a digital camera at the time was probably about the size of a house brick. And this was what we used to get a lot of the texturing information. I remember taking it around Statue Park and doing all that, but we also got to meet Piers Brosnan. He came into the canteen, and Sean Bean, which was really cool. And we also got to go around the costume department, so we got to see all of the costumes that were going to be used. So that's where I got a lot of my major reference for that. But yes, it was great to be able to go around. And then bizarrely, a couple of years ago, because I now work in film, I went back to Leavesden, and the actual Eurocopter was still there at Leavesden, and I got to go inside it and, you know, have a little play with it. I mean, it was absolutely wrecked because it had been outside for 20 years. But yeah, what fun.
Oh wow.
They asked us for money. It's one of the very few times that I got a phone call from outside the firm. So this Belgium chap, and I managed to work out what he was saying in the end. Basically, they wanted money for using their helicopter, the Eurocopter. We just said, we're not paying you for that. And we changed the name. I think it says Eurochopper.
That's right, Eurochopper, yeah.
Yeah, we just changed the name.
Oh. I think we've got a microphone somewhere, so if people have questions, I hope we do. If people have questions, I will ask it in just a moment. Before we get though to any audience questions, I'm going to ask this one. If Goldeneye was made today, right, we would have DLC, right? That game would have an expansion of some description. So here's my hypothetical question: if you put that game, when you finished development and you were able to add to the game afterwards, what would you have included?
Yeah, it's also a tough one because pretty much everything that we wanted to do, we put into the game. So...
Yeah, because I mean, when you've got access to the entire Bond universe, I mean, I know Carl had great fun putting in the Moonraker and the Egyptian settings because that's what he wanted to do. So, you know, and then I got to put in the characters I wanted to put in, which were Baron Sandy and Mayday and Odd Job,
right,
because I wanted to put them in. So, you know, we've been able to, certainly on the art side, pick and choose from anything we wanted to in the entire Bond universe and actually put it in there. So, you know,
get better work from people if they're doing the thing that they really want to do.
Well,
but you know, as for DLC, I don't know. I mean, you could just look at a big bumper book of every Bond movie. We could have done. One of the things that crossed my mind very early days was could have made it a racing, skiing, shooting game. So then you'd get the cars.
Yeah.
That's
It had a tank.
It did have a tank. Yeah. But we made the decision, no cars, because you know, it's hard enough to make a good game that's a shooting game without trying to make two other kinds of game that are also good at the same time.
So, hopefully a microphone has appeared. There's one over here. Please do, if you want to have a question, sorry, come through to the central reservation. Do speak into the microphone because we might not be able to hear it.
form an orderly queue.
Form a queue. Go on, sir. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you? What's your name?
Hi, I'm Rich.
Hi, Rich.
Hi. What was the main decision to actually go for a first-person shooter for, like, your first-person shooter that Rare's ever done? You basically mentioned that there's no documentation. You have no idea how to do these sorts of things. So, what was the main complications of that?
Wow.
It's like, well, we don't know why we shouldn't do it, so let's do it.
I don't really know how to answer this. I mean, it's just what we felt like doing. I mean, I guess in the context, nobody said the acronym FBS. That didn't exist. I can't even remember.
I think it was to become James Bond, wasn't it? That was the whole point. We wanted to be James Bond.
Yeah, that's basically it. Be as true to the movie as possible, only it's a video game. So obviously you want to be inside the character. And I think I hadn't even played Doom when I wrote the document. I think what we played was Time Crisis.
Virtual Cop.
A lot of Virtual Cop. We put a lot of money into that.
Yes.
And we loved it, especially Mark and myself. So really, I mean, those are first person, technically first person. So that's where that came from.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rich.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Matt.
Hey, Matt.
My original question was going to be asking around the potential sequels arguments around the world by making your job slightly shorter than the other multiplayer characters. But actually, my real question is around level design. One of the things that my friends and I noticed when we first played Goldeneye was that you felt like you were in the movie. That you play the game, that first level, dropping into the toilet, it's so accurate to the actual movie itself. So what was the process that you went to make the level design so involved in the movie itself?
Well, we had all the reference from the art department, so we had all the physical sets, and we knew exactly how big everything was going to be. So we had all of that reference, and of course, because we'd been to the sets and we'd photographed everything, we had actual reference for all the textures and so forth. So, and of course it's funny to start in the toilets, let's face it. So that was kind of the reason for that. And for Odd Job, I did make Odd Job, and because we had no reference for how big he was, it's a guess. So yeah, that's my fault, because I think Harold Scatter is actually a lot taller than I built him. But yeah, that was my fault, so yeah.
It's a strange thing nobody ever said, from testing for example, nobody ever said, do you know this Odd Job is a problem?
Yeah.
It was never given, so far as I can recall, it may be on one of the facts lists, you know, there were 300 bugs listed.
Well, I certainly didn't see it.
You know, we didn't know. We didn't know Odd Job was going to be a big deal.
If the game was made today, would it have been patched?
It would have been polished a lot more, and I think that would have been a shame.
Would have been a shame.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kiko. I was wondering, did the user any knowledge from previous projects such as Donkey Country or Killer Instinct, apart from the camera, to incorporate in this project, for example, to make the production more efficient?
From my point of view, the answer is simple no, because I didn't work on any of those projects. So I came in straight from university, so it was all hit the ground running and figure it out as you go along.
Yeah, I mean, 9 people on the team of 11 had never made a video game before in their life. Several of them had come from university, and they had been trained in Alias Power Animator, maybe?
No, we use some proprietary software at the university, so that's why my 3 months were learning Power Animator.
It's all the same, you just clicky, clicky, click. But, you know, the sensible answer is, because there had been no 3D games, the closest thing was Killer Instinct, but really, it was absolutely no help, because it was completely fake 3D. CPU rendered, no GPU. So, and none of the guys who did any of the software on that project went on to Goldeneye except for myself. So, you know, really it's no.
Alright, thank you.
Thank you, Kiko.
Hi, Auntie. I just want to say thank you for Odd Job, thank you for Crouch Mode, thank you for Slappers Only. I got many kills doing that, it's awesome. So on the first level on Dam, there's a section across the water that's still there. I wondered if you could sort of give an insight as to what was going on there and what your plan was for it.
Again, this is talking
the
for
story?
Carl.
It's a shame Carl isn't here, because he'd be able to absolutely nail this question.
Yeah, he originally did build something over there, didn't he?
There was some talk, I can't remember who it was. So a lot of these situations, you just got 3 people in a room and you're just throwing around ideas, you can't remember who said what. So, you know, there was some talk, we'll have a motorboat, you know, it'd be cool, you can go over the dam. It would have been a nice thing, you know, but when it came to the crunch, it was just like, no.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's still there, isn't it?
Yeah. Except if you flew over there, there's basically nothing there.
Yeah, I bought an action replay card on the N64 purely to get over there.
Yeah.
And it was a very expensive waste of money, that.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mike from Mike Tender 64. I just want to say, thank you so much for the very happy memories. It's been an absolute pleasure. I played the game with my brother, my sister. I've introduced all my friends to Goldeneye as well. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. First off, Goldeneye or Perfect Dark?
You're gonna start a fight here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, with Perfect Dark, because it was our IP, we got to create everything. So obviously I got to create the iconic look for Joanna Dark from stuff that interested me. But to say, I got to work on a James Bond game, I mean, it's 50-50 for me, because both of them were great games to work on.
Very tough. Can't be answered.
And my other question is, as you were saying about the animation in the suits.
Yes.
Now there is one particular animation, if you shoot somebody just right in the buttocks.
Yeah, yeah.
How the hell did you do that and why?
Well, the question is why not, obviously. And I probably gave him a good sharp slap to his backside, I'm pretty sure. He'd have enjoyed that.
I'm pretty sure he still films it today.
Yeah, he would do.
Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Mike.
Did the one in, did it stay in?
Backside. Backside.
In the front, did it stay in?
Yeah, backside.
Hi there. Question. The film came out, the game came out 2 years after the film. What were the ideas for the filler levels, like silo, cabins, as such, because obviously they're not in the film at all?
You boss?
Is to extend the gameplay, because a film is 90 minutes,
Yeah.
and we wanted to give people 10, 20 hours of gameplay. So the whole idea is that you give people more objectives and more places to roam, so that the gameplay is extended.
Were they stuff like that may have been in the film, or they were...
I don't think, I was just going through my mind, I was just thinking, was there the silo in the movie? Basically, they didn't, I can't remember any scene in the screenplay that they cut. They did reduce scenes, but basically all the locations in the script were in the movie. Silo, I think Carl just said, I'd like to model a kind of, Russian style.
Yeah,
I was like, fine, do it.
yeah. Essentially, it's to extend gameplay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say this guy has got the coolest shirt in the room?
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Hey guys, so I'm Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Similar question to what we just had. Once you saw the finished Goldeneye movie, did you change any design decisions that you've made previously, or have any ideas or anything to add after you saw the film?
Bizarrely, when I was watching film for the first time, I remember that sequence right at the beginning when he's escaping. And I just felt like I was actually in our video game, because I'd spent so much time looking at the walls and the floor. When I was watching that film for the first time, I spent most of the time looking at the textures that were actually in the film. Because once we'd finished the film, there was no, oh here guys, here's a video copy or anything like that. We only still had the reference that we'd had from the art department, because the video didn't come out Video didn't come out for another 18 months, so we still didn't have any more reference from the actual film other than what you remembered seeing from when you saw it at the cinema.
I agree, I mean, because we have so much detailed information, and the way they make those movies, it is to plan. They do make them according to the plan, editing notwithstanding. So there were no surprises. The only surprise, if anything, was that it came out, it was a good movie. It was one of the better James Bond movies, and that was a relief. And apart from that, it was cool. It had cool titles.
Thank you guys.
Hi, I'm James.
Hey, James.
Hi. One of my favourite things about Goldeneye is how, the level design, you made the most out of every inch of space. Like Bonker 2, you can play through it 1,000 times. There's just so many ways to approach that level. So what I want to ask is, I've noticed since Goldeneye came out, I guess the next decade, first-person shooter level design changed to sort of linear, open areas like battlefields, and I think that kind of feeling you had where you're exploring places and doing things with your own intuition is gone. I think that I was wanting to ask, number one, what did you think about Activision's taking Goldeneye at the end of the 2000s, where they kind of turned it into a Call of Duty clone? And also, my second question is, do you think an FPS in the style of Goldeneye is viable today? Do you think publishers will actually make that? Or do you think it's a lost cause? Because I'd love to see a game like Goldeneye, a modern take on Goldeneye in the future, but it just hasn't happened, other than Perfect Dark, of course, and maybe Time Splitters 2.
What was the second question, briefly?
Second question is do you think it's viable to make a new Goldeneye style game today? Would publishers actually sign up on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And as for the Activision game, we haven't played it.
Yeah.
Oh. We might have time, sorry.
I just want to say, the Activision game, I didn't think it was very good. Big disappointment.
I read some reviews.
Yeah. Just a Call of Duty clone. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
comment. We've probably got time for maybe, depending how quick the questions are, it might be 1 or 2 questions.
How about 3 questions?
We'll give it a go. We'll give it a go. Come on.
Hi, my name is Jack.
Hey, Jack.
I'd like to say thank you for including Robbie Williams as an NPC. You always made me feel guilty about shooting him, but it had to be done. Regards to my question, you guys once held a memorial death match for the first person to get 100 kills before you removed the multiple bombs. Who won?
Yeah, we touched on that. I can't actually remember.
Was it Edmonds?
I think it might have been Mark Edmonds, but it also could have been me. But it was kind of close. It also could have been Dave, though. Let's just leave it. Let's just leave it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
Just a quick one. At the end of the down level, one jumps off and swan dives to his death.
We're aware.
Yeah. Did you ever try and put a bungee rope in, or was it just something the N64 just...
I think we sat down, didn't we? And we said, how are we going to do this?
Yeah, because at the time, the actual way that rigging is when you put bones inside something to move it. These days you have some very complex rigging tools to make rope work. At the time, you didn't. So what it would have been one square that got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, which was not nice. And of course it would have been very, very small indeed, because the camera was quite a long way away. So in the end it was just, no, we're just not going to show it.
Funny other way it is.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, again, that we didn't get an issue from anyone about that, because you have to jump off and apparently there's no rope. So I was kind of, crossing my fingers. Hopefully no one will say anything.
There was no floor either.
People use their imagination, What can I say?
I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Chris.
Hey Chris.
Big fan of the game, played it many times as I was a child, still play it on the occasion nowadays. Unfortunately sold my N64 many years ago, so I've resorted to play on emulators, but I'm hoping to get an N64 again in the future. One question though, whose idea was it to include on the runway level that you could run people over the tank? Because that was, to me, just pure genius, and I spent many hours just deliberately running over people, listening to the sound of the crunching bones, and just repeatedly doing it again and again.
Same.
I love satisfying.
There are like non-game parts of that game where I just love to muck about. The other one that I like to cite is 7A, the bunker, I think we called it. The bunker interior, and you can just set off the alarms, and 3 guards will come down the stairs, infinite spawn. 3 guys come down the stairs, 3 guys come down, and you can shoot off their hats. Hats fall on the ground, and then you kill them. So what you end up with is an enormous pile of hats.
I remember that.
So in the early days, when Mark implemented this feature, and I was just, this shooting off the hats is so good. We were rolling on the floor laughing, how much joy it gave us, I can't express. And,
simple things.
It's funny. And the game would crash because there were so many hats. So we had to put in a limit, I guess it's 100, and they cycle, they start fading out. So, but to your question, which was, can you remind me?
Yeah, the running over people with a tank on the runway, like whose idea
So
was
much
that?
fun. Things like that, they just happen. Because it's like, what's going to happen when you drive the tank over a person? The genius of it really was the audio.
Yeah.
That audio is so perfect.
They nailed it, absolutely nailed it. The other good one was the paintball mode as well. I know that was one of the things in there that was really good. As well as also being able to shoot them in the crutch and they reacted to it.
That did stay in. That did stay in. Oh,
yeah, that did. I remember that.
I'm sure that was hand animated. I'm pretty sure that was hand animated.
Yeah, there's one time we spared Duncan.
On the floor. In a pile of paint.
That used to be like a 40-second animation.
Yeah.
It was too much.
Genius. Thank you guys.
Thank you. We're actually a little bit over time, but thank you so much. Martin and Brett will be just out here in a couple of minutes. If you've got something you wanted to get signed, you wanted to say hello, do join them out there, and they'll be happy to do so. But please give a warm hand to our Goldeneye girls.